Welcome to episode 18 of Zero Basis Points podcast. You have Haik and George on the line. George, how's it going?
All right, man. What's up? Nice to be back on some zero basis points. So
No
it's been
kidding.
too long, man.
It's 2026, first one of the year.
That's right. Happy 2026, everybody from the zero basis points family.
We had the crypto Christmas one going into the end of the year, and then this is the one for the beginning. And as you can tell, if you're watching this on YouTube or anywhere else where you can see our faces, I've I I'm in the camp, I'm in the lab working. So we've been busy for the first couple of weeks of 2026 on some big stuff. And just I think I mentioned this before. It's like if you see me looking like this, it means we've been working on something exciting. So there's a lot to be coming out in the next couple of weeks to months as we productize a lot of what we're doing internally at Arca. But on the zero basis points stuff, we always say how we want to be a little more disciplined, like we are in the gym with our podcast. Never happens, but we try our best. So hopefully we'll be coming out with a much more scheduled release cycle this
Right.
year.
I
Right.
think every Friday would be a nice target that I like. We could talk about it in front of everybody. I'd like to I'd like to record a podcast every Friday. Did we start zero basis points in 2025?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Look at this.
We always talked about it. I think even when we met from T3 in 2024, we always talked about like a podcast and why there isn't one out there. And then in 2025 is when we started it, like right before you joined in August. So this is episode 18, which is crazy to say. And then now there's a couple of more that have followed suit. Like you have the AI for advisors, you have a couple of others in the space. So there's all these that are coming out, which I think is great. It just was a much needed thing in our market. I think with the wealth management space progressing so quickly with AI, people just wanted to be in tune with what's going on. So it made I think a really nice playing field for a lot of others who wanted to compete and come into the space and start talking about it too.
Right. And I love like when I see the names of these other podcasts that come out and I think of our zero basis point, and it could be interpreted in so many different ways, but fundamentally in the advice space, we know how we charge on bips and a lot of things happen that way. But when we want to offer our thoughts on what's happening in the space, you and I have been doing this for the better part of the last 20 years. We've been working in RIAs. We've built technology tools that we've, built and sold. And now we want to give our opinion. And we were doing that so often when we first met, which is crazy to think that, as far as like my wife and I laugh, she laughs, because it seems like we've been doing this for 5 years.
Yeah,
It's it's that there's not really like a memory of like something that I did previous this to anybody in my family. It's just so this is really the only thing that we're working on. But back to why we started zero basis points is we wanted to say so much about what we were seeing, especially on LinkedIn. And the wealth management space is so niche, and there are what I see, new players coming in from a technology perspective that because I've been in it for so long that we can have, I think, a pretty based opinion on what's being said out there.
definitely.
That's what the podcast was all about. It's not like just trying to engage on LinkedIn to me is just talking about a race to the bottom. I mean, what
Yeah,
about you? It doesn't get me anywhere. It just kind of gets my heart pumped.
there's so much going on with the social media side of things, and unfortunately we're stuck having to be on LinkedIn because I think there's so much more exciting stuff on like X. And as you've seen, they like released their like algorithm, so people are gaming it and all that. But speaking of X, I think to start the year there was Scott Adams, which you introduced me to with the book Reframe Your Brain, which I finished, and we talked about it on the simultaneous sip a couple of months ago at this point. But
Yeah,
I
I
know
wish I
he
could
had.
touch the applause button right now. I don't have access.
You want me to do the applause? I'll do it
But
right now.
Hike finished Reframe Your Brain. You know?
I
We're in front of a live studio audience for those of you listening today. Yeah, we're at the Pally Center in Manhattan.
Yeah, I call that book the common sense book because a lot of the stuff that he talks about in there was things that I've come in my own life to that conclusion as well, and kind of have used it. But it's always good refresher to have it be mentioned. And recommended for folks who are looking to just kind of take a step back and look at things in life that have happened, whether it's to themselves, to others, how to deal with it. There's also another book that I highly recommend called Surrounded by Idiots. Also good. It's not even like it's not. It sounds funny as a title, but it's just how different people have different ways of addressing the problem. So I think a lot of like the interactions within the Reframe Your Brain of how you position yourself with someone else comes from the other stuff I've read elsewhere. So I'm a big fan of books. I always try to like read a couple, and Reframe Your Brain was a good one. So, but I know with that said, George, Scott Adams is one of those folks who have had an impact in your life, and it's someone you followed, and obviously, comes up on X a lot. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about that with his passing and what he's done before that.
He got my attention in like 2016, like because he got canceled. Really, I always say like they say like if a book gets banned, like that's the one you want to read next. And I'm kind of the same approach to just topics and people. So I gravitated towards what he was talking about. Like, why would he get banned? Doing my own research, written these books that are easy to digest. He's the creator of that cartoon Dilbert,
Yep.
which was like a side hustle for him. To be honest, like I never thought it was funny. I never really read it. It wasn't my style. Like whatever.
Yeah.
But he was a big part of that corporate world. And a lot of the wealth management space is a part of that corporate world, but we're independent space in that we don't want to be a part of that corporate world. Like we rely on, you know, large financial institutions to help us be independent advisors and support independent advisors. But ideally, we're a very not corporate space. Now, when you're reading that book, though, it's I think it helps a lot of people that are stuck in that corporate mentality unlock a little bit, and that's kind of the reframes that are obvious to you and me, because we've been forced to kind of not forced, well, forced by the attributes of
Ourselves.
our own personality.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We were going to say to just walk into the ring and the arena and just say, you know what, if I'm going to do this, why would I do it for anybody else? And so Scott Adams, he teaches it's not just people that are stuck in that, but I think a lot of people, a reframe is a healthy thing. It's a lot of common sense, but so is like I loved reading like books about Taoism. Taoism observes, just as an example of something from the outside. You read books about Taoism, it's really to observe the rules of nature and listen to understand what's the best, healthiest thing to do next. How do you love everybody and tell the truth? Like, kind of stay these fundamentals that sound so obvious. Love everybody and tell the truth, but that's really hard. And then you might get an analogy that I remember. If your mind is razzled, you need to stop and slow down and breathe to calm it down. In the same way that if I stirred up, and this is like an old monk, Lao Tzu, but if I stirred up, he did it with apple cider, and we saw just like the apple cider just stirred up, but if it's cloudy, but if you wait, it eventually the sediment falls to the bottom and it's very clear. And he was teaching his student to mimic the apple cider, and those are obvious but good reminders of fundamentals to me. So although obvious, I liked that book and a lot of what Scott Adams says, but I also like the community that got around him to support him, to realize like I'm not the only one that likes Scott Adams for the reason that I do. There are millions of people that support this guy, and his embrace to death, like, or passing, as I would rather refer to it, was unreal. Not bugging out. He was just on every single live stream every day, like he always does. So he was just very brave, unbothered by other people's opinion. He worked through pain. We talk
Yeah, of
about that a
course.
lot, and so I admired him a lot. And yeah, his legacy is strong because he just was such a part of an active community on X that he's inspired so many people to do more. So um, and he also inspired the simultaneous sit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I know he did that, and then there was some of the stuff in the book. I think reframe in one of the reframes was around your physical health, your fitness, right? And I think a lot of that is also good because you start tending to do stuff like workouts, and he was talking about like, hey, if you keep doing this, and then you feel it's much easier to like work out than not work out after a certain point, which is completely true. And, that's kind of the lifestyle that I'm on. But speaking of the fitness, like, has that helped you on your fitness journey? Because you did start out, in 2025 following, our mandate of like having to go to the gym, work out yourself. But like, how's that changed for you? Are you feeling, did you have to use any of those reframes to get to that point? Or were you kind of like, yeah, I'm just going to do this. And then you slowly came back to um, that conclusion?
If I fall mentally off center, working out really brings me back to say, let me just take this off because I'm not typing. I don't need to wear it. Up to the pandemic, and I've said before, I worked out every day. I was always a runner, even as far as so seventh grade. So I was like 13 years old. I remember just running and getting like a runner's high. I remember I was
Yeah.
listening with my headphones. I was listening to a Fish song. We were going to talk about Bob Weir's death. And I got like this runner's high, and it like kind of combined with the music. And I was just like, oh my God. I remember I came home and I was telling my mom how amazing it was. So I always acknowledge the impact that running had on my mind. And then I would go to the gym every morning, at least 5 days a week up until the pandemic. Like before work, I was one of the
Yeah.
earliest. So I would like be there sometime between 5:30 and 6. So I could be at the office by like 8:30 ish.
Yeah.
So I got that. But then, yeah, then 2000 to 2025, not doing much. But going back, it's very easy when you're doing something like Arca, which you and I love, like very passionate about doing this all the time. And I was just telling you yesterday, it's easy to come down and sit at your computer and forget to turn on the lights and music and
Yeah.
eat and get water. And then like, so
And then you crash out like me, like the last time on a call,
yeah,
like
yeah,
sweating.
exactly. No, it happens to me too. Like by the time I'm going upstairs, I'm like crawling up. I'm like, I need dinner. I need food. But working out, making that at least an hour of every day makes me a very happy man. It makes it easier to do hard work. Hands down, no no way around it. So I love doing what I do anyway, but there are times when there's the final push. Call it like the fourth set of working out.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do 4 sets, to come back and do the time from 9 at night until 11 at night, those 2 hours are what, you know, that's like that little edge. And then I watch, my son and his friends who are 16 and the varsity football team, like, the kids who are working out off season are the ones who are, like, better students, better athletes, starting, and, that's everybody who's working here has to be in that space. So yes, it wasn't forced. You didn't force it. Pete Lorenzo built me a blueprint. Says he made it easy for me. Spoon fed
Yeah.
me, a program. So I feel great, and I am addicted to doing it. Where like yesterday, I actually ended up not being able to get it in. I was talking to you in my car until like what it was like 8 at night or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I was gonna try to do it when I got home, and I was just dead.
It's the
Didn't do
worst.
much after that.
I'm doing a deload this week. So for me, I'm like cruising through my workouts. Doesn't take me long at all. And for those listening, I might have mentioned volume deloads before, but every 4 weeks, I reduce my workout to 2 sets. Half the sets, half the reps, same weight, just to prevent any injuries, get the muscle with the full range of motion, etc. And then, the next week it starts again. So it's always a periodization of my workouts where I go like super heavy, and then every 4 weeks it'll be volume deload until week 16, which will be a new strength week, where you're setting a new personal record. And then after that, you do a full deload, which is 50% of the weight, 50% of the sets. I kind of, while I'm in it, I hate it because I feel like I could always do more weight or like do more reps and sets. But like the discipline is there where I'm like, I'm doing this for preventative, injuries and things like that. So it's just mentally, it's a thing to kind of a different type of mood to get into to go work
Yeah,
out.
like
You're like,
if I did deload, so I would do it at half the weight. I'd be benching 75 pounds.
well, you'll keep the weight the same for every 4 weeks. You just come down half of the weight, half of the sets and reps for the first deload, volume deload. And then finally after like in week 16, then you'll do a new PR, personal record. Then you'll drop like full 50% weight, 50% of the sets and reps at that point. So if your max then is like 150, then yeah, you'd go down to 75.
Yeah,
which
no,
is
that's not my
silly.
max. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Let's make some claims out there. Yeah, you're one rep. No, I'm
Yeah,
just
that's what
kidding.
I'm putting up 40 times, 4
Yeah,
sets.
yeah.
But although you've even added a little bit of weight,
You're
I
hitting
haven't tried.
combine numbers, right? So
Yeah, I haven't. I saw that. I haven't done my max yet. I don't know what my max is yet. So I need like my son to spot me while I figure out, like, if
yeah,
I'm
of
putting
course.
up 150 40 times, no problem now. No, I mean, I'm pushing through the last couple of each,
You can
70.
do. There's a one rep max calculator that I use sometimes if you want to just like figure out what it is. But I mean, do you want to put it out there for the public to know how much it is? You
Yes.
said 150 at 40
Yeah, I can do
reps.
150. That's 4 sets of 10,
Well,
155.
no, that's 10 then. I'm not going to count 40. It has to be 40 continuous. That's 10 reps then.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I stopped for 10. You're like, that's nothing. You start laughing.
Your max right now is a 200
All right.
with
Well, let's see.
150 at 10 reps. What I would recommend is you try to cross over that 225 because I always laugh.
Once,
I always send them, yeah,
once,
once. If you can at least do a 225 once,
bring
then
the camera into the other room right now. That would be funny. I mean, I could.
yeah,
I could.
just set it up and we have it recording. Yeah, God forbid you get injured. But no, have your son spot you and then do 225 once. And that's the new goal. And I actually put this goal to others too. Like my nephew who had started working out last year, I took him under my wing to the gym and everything. I wear squat shoes on days that I squat. And I told
Tell
him you
everybody
have
what squat shoes do. What do they do? Do they make you taller on your toes? You got to tell
no,
everybody.
so
Nobody
they
knows
have
what
a
they do.
slight
I,
tilt.
I,
So they
I have
have
an idea. Yeah.
yeah, they have a heel, so they have a slight tilt. So it kind of helps you sit more kind of further down. So you do what I call ass to grass squats, right? You go ass to grass. So it helps you kind of go all the way down without pushing your knees too much forward. So the placement of the feet, and a lot of people will put like weights under in their heels if they're wearing regular
Yeah, I
shoes or do it
stand on a
barefoot.
mat. Yeah.
Yeah, like a mat's a good one as well. But this is a perfect kind of height. And it's a hard plastic at the bottom, or sometimes it's wood. But I do the Addy Power Adidas like lifting shoes. So I tell my nephew and others in the network, I say, if you can squat 3 plates unassisted, no spot, just you yourself, and go ass to grass, full range of motion, I'll buy you your first squat shoes. And those things last for a long time. So, that's what I put out there. So for me, the markers are like 225 on bench is great. 3 plates on squat is great. 4 plates on deadlift. That's a great place to start for someone.
3 plates on both sides.
Yeah, obviously. You're not gonna
Well,
what are you do?
well, this
1.5
is
plates on each
this is
side,
the
make
wealth
3 total.
management space where we need to be very specific. Otherwise, we think 1.5 on each side.
Well, think of it this way. It's 225 pounds on bench, 315 pounds on squat, and then it's 405 for deadlift.
Yeah, I don't like the deadlifting thing. I'm like your a mother about that. No deadlifting. I see my son doing. I hear the thing coming down, the weight dropping. I'm like, oh my. Top of the
There's a
fact
lot
that
of
it's nobody.
criticism out there around deadlifts. I think it's a great exercise if you have the form and you do the triggers correctly, because it's just a continuation of your body's movement from picking up that weight all the way to the top and then down. If you can get the triggers correctly, which is like tensing up your toes, your feet, getting rid of the slack in the bar, you know, tightening your glutes at the top, there's a bunch of these steps that you just have to do, which is great to do with light weight first for a long time until you have that chain down, and then just slowly increasing the weight. But some people, which I think we've talked about it on this podcast before, ego lift, and they put like 5 plates because they see someone else doing it or they want to show it off, etc. And then that's when you herniate a disc. Very easy to do that with a deadlift because of there's so much weight, and then you're just like hunched over. It's so easy to kind of do, curled back and then just like herniate a disc, pinch a nerve, do whatever. So you have to go in there knowing exactly what you're doing. So I do it, but I don't recommend everyone does it if you're going to try to rush into it.
Like, I want to do curls and stuff because I'm trying to get like a bicep vein. So like when people see me with my shirt off, they're like, "Dude, you're the stack." Like,
Yeah.
why do you do a deadlift? Isn't it all? Is the whole thing an
It
ego lift?
works out your whole body.
Got
Like
it.
it works out from
There's a
legs,
muscle.
back, yeah, your core, everything. Same thing for a squat. You're not just targeting. A lot of people think, and I
I
had a
feel my quads burn. Like after you're squatting, you
well, that's
feel
the
like dead.
primary. It's
Yeah.
probably so your quads and glutes, just like your hamstrings too. It's primary muscles that get worked out, but the accessory muscles that you require to do a squat and a deadlift correctly, um, get worked out so much more. So I have a lot of people who come to me and they'll say like, "Hey, you bench so much. How can I bench that number?" And I'm like, "You're not even doing squats and deadlifts." And they'll be like confused because it's a leg muscle, but in bench you use leg drive. In bench, your back has to be strong enough and your core has to be stable enough for you to hold that weight and bring it down and up at the same time without, you know, um, messing up your form. So a lot of the stuff that you're doing that may not seem related specifically because you're not directly hitting chest on a squat, but you're keeping your core tight, you're keeping your back tight. Deadlift, you're keeping your shoulders and bringing them fully to the range of motion up at the peak. So there's all this stuff that happens. And I know we went kind of too far into the workouts, maybe for our listeners, unless we should do like a
No, I
tell
think
us if
it's
you want a
good.
full workout podcast. You can go to Altruist Gym with Jason Wank and just start putting up plates there and record it. But
We'll have to bring some plates with us. But
yeah,
yeah,
because I did see a little shortage of plates. I did count; it was like 300 pounds in aggregate with all the plates that were sitting at this rack. So we might have to throw a couple on there.
but there was a punching bag. You punch a punching bag for a while. That's exhausting.
That's maybe before calls with clients where they just anger you about Hazel. You just go in there and start tossing punches.
We're after the calls.
But yeah, so that's why I think, for it's not to go too far down into the fitness route. You could tell I'm anxious about fitness because I've been deloading this week, so I'm looking forward to next week when I can
Right.
throw that weight around. But
And I
anyway,
didn't work out yesterday, so I'm anxious about it. I've got like too much to do today for a Friday afternoon.
hey,
Uh,
you got to squeeze it in.
no,
But
there's no problem fitting it in. So
yeah, well, we'll
at some
switch gears
point,
into the some of the more AI
yeah,
stuff because it's been a wild couple of weeks too. Claude work, everything that's been coming out around it, all this vibe coding stuff. Everyone's talking about agentic too. I don't know if you saw like what's going on with even Palantir. They put out a whole thing about like, hey, here's how like agentic should be and what they should be doing. So a lot of these other industries as well are coming into it and just addressing that question because payments are becoming agentic as well. That was a really big thing at Davos this year that they were talking about in the World Economic Forum. So, I mean, you're at the forefront with a lot of our clients that we're onboarding with the agentic workflows. I'd love to hear one, the state that's in, like how are our clients at Arca thinking about it? And then also what you're seeing out there in the social media space, LinkedIn. What are the concerns around it? How do you feel generally?
generally, I feel like last year and kicking off the beginning of this year, we are in optimization mode. Everybody is optimizing what they put into the frameworks last year. Final maturation of agents, because like that's what we've gotten good at is speeding up to getting the agents that I say like boots on the ground so that they're actually doing the work. And as far as what our clients want, it's what's next. So backlog and ideation. What are some use cases? So there's taking that into the news. There's news about, people really are really not using AI. In wealth management, it seems like the general consensus is it's not really being used that much, not to the degree that it's moving the needle. It's not increasing AUM. It's not really saving advisor productivity. Kind of understand that. If you go to an advisor conference and you see a bunch of these older advisors, yeah, I get that. Makes sense. However, I engage with a segment of RIAs that are very growth oriented, definitely using some of these tools. And then they see how we're using it on a level that they hadn't anticipated would be available yet. So I don't agree with what I'm seeing in a lot of some of the general consensus out there. Kitsy's, who's the most respected mind I've seen forever, has very good data points and use cases about how AI is being adopted by advisors. And when he talks about it, it's like super close to uh, like the RIA or the advisor day to day, talking about how we're avoiding proximity to the client. But nobody's talking about on the larger wealth management space is speeding up because the larger institutions are adopting AI that's saving them 35 to 55% of time on their processes so they can grow at that clip, at that much faster without hiring any more humans to do the work or bloating the staff that they already have with more work. Our clients are excited about what's next because a lot of we have more a way better ways that we were doing things 3 months ago and 6 months ago, and everybody has ideas for how they want to see it implemented this year and immediately.
What I've seen, so there's a couple of different things. I call it AI FUD out there. Um, One of them is this whole Claude work stuff, which I'm super excited about. There's going to be generic automations and agents and things like that that are going to exist and are going to come out, which is awesome. That's where it's going to trend from a perspective of, hey, here's what's out there. However, as we're seeing right now, like even ChatGPT is OpenAI bought a health company because they want to be able to like do ChatGPT for health. The reason they're starting to put stuff into these silos, not only for the HIPAA relationships and the data side of it, but mostly because they're realizing that the generic tools aren't always going to be the best for these very specific niche verticals that exist, which I consider wealth management being one of them. Yeah, there's generic stuff that you do in wealth management, as in email writing or outreach, which there's a bunch of these, finnies and wealth feeds and things like that that exist out there that are competing for that, the organic growth market. However, there's really specific stuff that you need to build it out for. And I was speaking to someone who is fairly high up in the big four consulting firms. And even they're realizing that, with generic models out there, they can't go into a certain industry and start using it because it doesn't work. It doesn't have that knowledge base. It doesn't have the standard procedure for a lot of these things. So what they have to do is create an enterprise level, enterprise specific AI LLM to then use for that industry. And I think that's why I'm excited about the generic stuff that's out there. But people who are just, hey, this exists, now we can do all this other stuff, it's totally wrong. And I think that's where they're missing the mark, where it needs to be so, I don't want to say custom tailored to you almost building a full thing from scratch, but it needs a lot of the training to still succeed. And that's where I think a lot of folks who are coming out in criticism of it saying we're not using it, unfortunately, aren't investing that time. And that's why they don't see the ROI. It's not going to be, there's so much low hanging fruit that's going to be out of the box, which maybe starts getting into that hype of like, I'm just going to do this and it's going to be done. But unfortunately, you have to be realistic with how you're adopting this tool. You should treat it just like anything else you would do. There's going to be training, there's going to be a learning curve, and then you're going to see the ROI. It's not going to be instant ROI today unless it's so simple that it's like, I'm just going to summarize your emails.
Right. Let's say you have like 5% of the advisors out there, which is high, that would actually use Claude to write something to automate some of their stuff. 5% of every advisor on the planet. High, high mark. Then the only way that the AI is going to get to the advisors with some sort of instruction that the advisors trust and they're going to use it, it's going to be deployed from the institution.
Yeah.
We're deploying AI from the institutional standpoint. And our AI agents coming to me while I'm talking have graduated from the University of Arca, meaning they've been taught by people like you and me. So when these agents start doing their work out there, they'll even come back to us like humans and say, we're hitting our capacity. Like we are transitioning, thousands of advisors and opening up all the accounts, but we're getting too much. And too much information, I'm feeling overwhelmed, like a human might say. And the parallel that I want to make to that is in 2020 to 2025, everybody was talking about a data lake. Data lakes were hitting their capacity. It wasn't like, oh, get it into the data lake and then surface it how you want. We started talking about data lake houses. We started talking about the data mesh. And if you take that same approach of how we partitioned the data lake, a an AI agent needs that type of capacity scaling um, ability in order to do so many things at once. This is so to be able to recognize about that for a new account to be opened, it could be something, a very simple process, or it could be very wobbly based on where the advisor is bringing it in from with their NIGO data. So For the agents, that's where I talk about maturation a lot. And it's, you don't just mature an agent by updating what you're telling it. You're updating it in so many technical capacities that I'm not even going to talk about. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, and I completely agree. I mean, that's the thing that's overlooked. Obviously, in the sales cycle, you want to create this vision and this kind of feeling that it's going to be so instantaneous. But there's so much work that's done, and that's why I feel like something that I would love to hear from our audience is like, what type of tedious work do you do day to day that you would love for an agent to do? Like, if you could, wave a magic wand and it's done. Like, what's something that you're doing day to day? And I bet you there's a really big difference between what we're going to hear from the institutional enterprise clients that we deal with versus what we hear from the RIA clients and kind of a little more downstream of a solution. Because I imagine when we look at the institutions and enterprise that we've been working with, a lot of it is so specific to certain flows that they're doing and investing so much time that even the RIA might not realize, hey, when I put in this request, it has to go through these many people for it to get done. We optimize and have an agent for that process. But then the RIA side of it, an advisor or financial professional might just say, I want my CRM data to like be summarized, or I want it to just go into like simple form and that's it. So like the level of complexity is going to vary. If you can do the super complex, I think downstream you can do the rest. So I'd love to hear from both RIAs and institutions out there, like what are the stuff that you're investing the most time in with humans doing the tedious tasks that are repetitive that you would love to just wave a magic wand and have an agent just do it. And I'm curious. We have ideas of where it goes. We have ideas of how that progresses. Proactivity is one thing we always talk about when it even comes to chat functionality and the cognition layer. But realistically, I'd love to hear from advisors like, what are you struggling with the most? And I bet you it's going to be surprising. There might be top 10 list of stuff that's going to be like, red tail to this system. I need this entry and this entry and that. But like when I'm talking to some prospects as well who are working across a tech stack that we've always said, we work not only in one silo, we work with multiple systems. You have someone who's entering in data for investments here, who's expecting stuff to come in into another system that they need to cross reference, who then needs to then reconcile that data back with cash flow and bank data that's sitting on another accounting system. So all this stuff is going to be things that agents are going to help with. And I think people are just not imagining how deep it can get. But I open up the arena to advisors to come in. And if you're hearing this, comment on wherever you're watching this video, like, this is what I would love to see, or I'm having difficulty with this thing. I would love for an agent to solve it. And I think we're going to be having a webinar for ARCA specifically, right, George?
right.
That's going to look at some of the use cases.
Yep, right. We'll be having a webinar talking through some use cases that are in production in real life. A lot of the use cases that you and I talk about are up market, how it gets deployed down market to advisors. I'll tell you how it's going to be happening in 2026 because we're going to be doing it. Because an advisor is not going to say, I spend 15 as a requirement. They're not going to say, I spend 15 minutes of my day getting myself up to speed on a client.
Yeah.
Log into my CRM, I click around, I log into Orion, I click around, start to get the wheels spinning about this client, as opposed to a location based chat tool. It has to be inside of a system that can present the data the way that an advisor sees it, but an advisor wants to log into the system and say, what's going on with George Guidotti? And if I'm the client, the AI chat tool is going to look at Orion, it's going to look at Redtail, it's going to read the notes, it's going to look at the performance, and it's going to bring it in. And all that information is going to be as of 5 days ago for the CRM, as of yesterday for the performance tool. But ARC is going to cross reference that data in real time and say, based on all those positions, holdings, QSIPs, tickers, whatever that we're consuming, we're cross referencing in real time market data we're getting from our sources like NASDAQ and Morningstar. This is what's going on with this client and some things you might want to think about for this meeting. Do you want an agenda? That's like the advisor use case. Then it gets into, oh well, yeah, so you've got to do this stuff. And it's like, oh man, well, what do I got to do? You need to open up this or prepare this application, in which case ARCA is just presenting you back the things that you need to do and offering up its ability to serve that up or the instructions for how you can take care of it. So
Yeah.
that to me is how I hear these an RIA with 100 million, let's just say, or 250, or anything up to 4 billion. That's what they're
Yeah.
thinking.
I think I put that vision doc for Arca specifically, and we talked a little bit about it internally with our team and everything. But I think that's exactly what I expect as well. How do you take a lot of what a
Well,
human is going to do?
I have to admit that you influence where I arrive, where I think things are going. So I have read some of your opinion on having. So
So yeah, it's not completely unbiased, right? But no, but what I would love to, when I sit back and I think about it, I say, the AI should really be this level of almost a human, hybrid advisor, not the advisor that sits. And I completely agree with Kitsis. Like, I wouldn't have that AI talk to the client directly without them knowing they're talking to some AI or something in between, right?
right.
But what I would love it to do is replace a lot of the functionality that the advisor is spending so much time on. And that's why when I put that document together, I was thinking about how do I take what we know from an agentic standpoint and the AI we're using and start converting it over to human function or organism function. And one of the first things that make its way, and it's fairly obvious, is core script, which we used to use for the purposes of like consuming capital call, valuation, distribution docs, trusts, and things like that, becomes the seeing eye of the AI. So it literally is the optical nerve that's consuming data, because for us, it doesn't matter at the end of the day if it's going to be a capital call or it's going to be trust or it's going to be like that. You're going to want the AI to understand what it's reading. So it needs to first see it. Then that's how you hook it up to the rest of the system. And then really you boil it down to like the agents being the muscular system of an organism, pushing the buttons in the system, pushing the buttons on the computer. Um, and then finally, the cognition layer, the actual brain that's sitting on top of it that knows when something isn't right to tell you about it. That type of thinking doesn't really exist. I don't think is the first go-to for a lot of folks who are thinking about how to leverage AI in wealth management. And that's what we're trying to change, right? We're trying to get people to feel, hey, I'm going to have an assistant that's going to be a non-human AI that's going to do everything an assistant can. And it's going to be an extension of me even. But that's where I think a lot of the value really comes in, is if you can deploy these things to do what a human does, then you have a really interesting value prop that says you can spend more time with your clients. You can actually do the stuff you love, go grow your business organically, and be at the forefront of that, saying, hey, I have all this stuff behind me that I'm able to leverage to give you the best experience and the best value for what I'm doing. And I think that's really a powerful statement versus, hey, you're going to get a generated email that sounds like me, but it's not really. And it's just kind of cookie cutter language. That's what I would hate to see the wealth management industry turn to.
It doesn't, like Kitsy say, that's the type of example he talks about a lot. That doesn't move the needle. Doesn't
Yeah.
like increase AUM and create a lot of capacity for the advisor. I talk to lot of advisors who will say things that I I remember specifically. I come to my office every morning. I visit about 5 different portals, capture the data. I'm downloading documents. I'm organizing it. I'm manually aggregating it. This is an advisor. And I think there's a lot of advisors or somebody at their RIA, and I know that is doing this. They're manually aggregating data into a view somewhere that then needs to get uploaded or validated. So you are in some way, like you would use core script to look at that data, aggregate it. In some cases, that's good enough for the advisor, or to package them as transactions and put them in Adapar, or take the information that you extracted from those forms and put them onto the populate these documents so that they can be signed. All those different agentic experiences um, are where those are. I know we talk a lot about the upmarket use cases, but again, down market, I just see a lot of advisors enabling when they start getting into ARC and seeing how they can prompt it, enabling us to just visit those portals and aggregate the data, and then even just present it to you, and you say, "Wow, that normally takes me from 9 to 10:30." and it's
Yeah.
9:10, and it's done. I just went, I made a cup of coffee, and here I am.
That's why I talk about that multi-agent platform, the map of how things work. And if you take a lot of this data and aggregate it, what we've learned in dealing with all these clients is people are going to be booking stuff into the same system in different ways because that's just the rule. So you need an agent to do that side. It doesn't make sense to put that on the eye of the AI and say, hey, as you see it, it should go in this one way. Because then you have one client who says a net capital call should be a separate line item for contribution and a distribution versus someone that says, I just want to book the net amount. Right. So all this stuff is going to be things that you start digging into. And that's why you need a platform that can manage these multiple agents. And that's where what we build, where we don't have to do it custom for each client. It's scalable. We can come in and say, hey, here's what the AI is seeing. Because what I look at when I'm looking at a document is going to be the same as the other guy and the other one, et cetera. Right. It's same information coming off of it. However, how do I then book that information? Or how do I look at that information and get the intrinsic value I require? That's different per advisor. That's different per operational workflow that already exists. Those are the types of things that I think aren't being talked about enough. And a lot of folks out there who are pitching that type of workflow, um, I know it just doesn't exist because no one's doing it, right?
Right. Even I saw something this morning on X, and I don't even have the time to look at X as much as I used to, but it was like, oh, Claude, and oh, these are the SaaS model is dead, like there'll be no more. So there's a lot of that being said. And then there was this post by somebody who really knows what they're talking about, but saying that, the SaaS models who will survive will be open source. And I'm like, that's where sometimes I'm like, maybe you and I should be writing the books. Because when you're doing an implementation with these agents,
Yeah.
it's like, well, we can't work with that vendor because they're not open source. Or actually, we don't say that. It's they're not as easy to work with or as cool to work with because they're not open source. So they were kind of, dealing with these APIs, and we have those types of discussions. Like that's been like something we've been saying in the wealth management space for like 10 years. Like, yeah, they're not cool about integration. You know, how long will they survive? Not much longer, I guess.
Well, one thing that I find super interesting is that you yourself have used a lot of the Replit and a lot of these other things around vibe
Right.
coding, right? Vibe coding is there's if for anyone who hasn't seen them on X and other places, there's literally channels where a guy is vibe coding like applications making $1 million a month, and you see him just like playing music. It's like if you've ever seen some engineer code, it's not like that at all, right? But they make it this whole fun thing, and there's a personality behind it, and all these things, and a lot of people buy into that, saying, hey, like that's crazy. Like it's going to replace everything. Even I think we had an advisor who posted, someone who had vibe coded a game. I think it was a kid, which is awesome. Like that should be the next level of like folks who are doing it. And I think he had made a point of like, why can't we do this in the wealth management industry? There's there's a really big gap between vibe coding a small game and having a tool that actually works within the regulation and the data integrity of a full thing that you want to use for a purpose of like a process. And I think that's overlooked because we get caught up in this hype. There's this really funny video of David Attenborough I was talking to my clients about, where he's watching an orangutan and it has a hammer and and a nail, and it's just hitting it. Obviously it's not nailing it incorrectly, it's on like the side, it's just hitting it, then it's just cutting up some wood with like the axe, and he's just so curiously looking at it. And I think the comment or the caption for it was like, how senior developers look at like someone vibe coding an application. Yeah, you're doing stuff, but it's there's not really data integrity. There's a lot of stuff that's missing in the application that vibe coding doesn't address. If all of these things, we get to a much more streamlined model. And one of the books that I've been reading recently is the Launchpad or for Y Combinator. It talks around about the Collisons who were the Stripe team. These guys who basically set up like one code for payment systems everywhere, and Stripe has become a huge success and everything. It's like they saw a problem that existed and created this one streamlined way of doing it. Vibe coding is getting there, and all these replets and Claude work and Claude code and everything will get to a point where you can ship code easily and it'll write good code for a certain quality. But one thing that you're not going to have is going to be that enterprise level like software. That's why SaaS will not go away forever. It'll just be open source. It's just going to be, here's all the stuff that I've built that gives you the ability to do something else with it or tweak it, or you just come to us and we'll build the rest, right? So that's going to be the model that's going to be really interesting later on.
Right. And I mean, vibe coding and wealth management is like if the industry had a weekly risk call, it'd be like the first thing I'd bring up. Advisors think they can vibe code. Hey, what are we doing to mitigate that risk? All
Yeah.
right, well, let's deploy some solutions to them and tell them to try something real simple and see if they can get it to production because it's almost, yeah, it's impossible. And that all that stuff that you see on X and whatever other social media about vibe coding, like how much of that is just the companies doing their own advertising? And then
It's a
these
big
are their
part.
own bots and all that. You're like, because I've tried to use Replit, yeah, to build like Wealth Snap. And like, I thought I was going to build an agent. It was last November, dude. That I was going to build an agent that you could just talk to your phone and it would like build stuff in Wealthbox. Yeah, like I'm shaving. I'm like, yeah, why don't you schedule me an appointment? Thought I could
Dude,
do that with Replit.
we can do that. And we
I
talk
know
about
that
this
we
all the
can do that.
time.
I thought I
Yeah.
could do that with Replit. Okay.
Yeah.
This is
And then what did
before
you
I'm
run into?
officially working for Arca. And I'm thinking, how can I propel myself into this agentic reality without, working for you yet? So I was trying to figure out because I couldn't sleep on it. Like, because I didn't know that Replit wasn't perfect yet. So I'm like, how do I even sleep? I got this tool I can build and maybe retire next year. So and I know other people doing this that are really building tools. And the thing is when you vibe code real fast, you realize all of a sudden you got a fucking job, you know? And you're like doing QA and it's not working. You're pulling your hair out. You're like, this sucks. Like there's no way I can back out now. And it's just like all of a sudden you got a new business, man. Just if you were
there was there
serious,
was this there was this really funny other
pardon my
thing that
language.
had popped up. This other skit that literally described that same use case. There was a guy, it's basically a manager and his developer sitting across from each other. And he's like, hey, so this code looks really good. Like, I need you to change this one thing. And I guess the LLM's down. Like, that's the skit. Like, he can't do it himself. So he's like, yeah, hold on. It's like, it's not working. And then I guess, it comes back up and then he like changes it and he obviously pushes the request. And then the manager's like, LLM's down. And he's like, hold on, I'm just looking at it for a sec. Like, and he's waiting for his to come up because you become so dependent on the
Right.
ease that you have, like that initial part of it, where then you have to QA all the stuff. You're like, I got to do actual work around it. And then you realize you have a day job. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't work well.
I use Super Grok that I talk about, and I coach my daughter's basketball team. So a simple example of what I use, I have a project for this basketball team. I have to write emails about practices, games. I got to come up with rosters, all that kind of stuff. So I just say, I need a roster, 4 quarters, equal playing time across these, let's say 8 players can make tomorrow's game, right? Real thing for me that I got to deal with. So just make me an even roster so I don't have to think about it. And remember that last week, Natalie did the jump ball, so make somebody else do the jump ball. And then I get that output in like 2 seconds that would normally have taken me like a half an hour. So there are some like amazing use cases, and that's like a simple one where I use this tool to just buy myself some time. Well, yeah, literally used to just take me a half an hour. So I forget what my whole point was with that, but there are like plenty of use cases where we can use it to just speed up and simplify our time that are real. But anyway, so
I think the point is you got to use it. The people who know how to use it are going to be the ones who are going to be successful on it. And you should try things, but you
okay, yeah, that's
shouldn't.
what I was gonna say, man.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, dude, when I logged in, the projects weren't there. I'm like, where are the projects? They just weren't rendering. I'm like, oh, dude. I had to like refresh a couple times. I'm like, there it is, there it is, there it is. So yeah, that was like you do get hooked on it. Like that's how advisors are about your CRM. That's why when I build a CRM, you're like, man, we had to build the one tool that advisors like log into like right away every day. It's like,
Yeah.
couldn't we have picked something else like Riskalyze that they don't log into?
Yeah. Something they look at like once a month or something.
Yeah.
Like,
Maybe they think their computer is broken. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's too funny. But yeah, that's the real state of where we're going, and it's going to always progress. And that's why I think one thing that our listeners should always keep in the back of their minds is be very suspicious about news you hear around AI. There's a lot of FUD, a lot of clients who, a lot of platforms out there who want people to jump on and do this stuff thinking it's all going to be easy, but some of it is, some of it's great use cases, others are not, right? And one guy I think on X had posted, he's like, do you think I'm having fun on like Claude Code like to do this stuff? And you saw like his usage of all the credits, and it's like a 40G bill for like the month or something, and he's like, nothing shipped but I'm paying like this much. And it's everyone has different motives, and you just have to be cognizant about what you're seeing out in the marketplace, and just know that there's some truths to what's being put out there, but there's also stuff that you kind of have to sniff out. And the same thing happens in our industry. Unfortunately, we have, I think, people who have understood that technology in the wealth management space is lacking, and they're out to build good tech around it. There's others who are using the AI flood in our own space to get people super hyped up on stuff that doesn't didn't work before, and slapping AI on it doesn't work now either. So those are the types of things like we need to be more cognizant about. And there's a lot of I think our industry in the wealth management space that hasn't had this much attention yet, but it fits all the great criteria for someone trying to build a business. The tech is old. The people are willing to spend the money for the right tech, for the right solution, and if you show them enough of it, they'll buy in. How does it work after? TBD. Who knows? Like, that's going to be a different experience for everyone else. And there's a lot of rumblings around what's working now in the market and what's not based on posts we're seeing. But, we'll see how that transforms.
Right. Well, what I think will always make our agents different, like I said, is that they go to school at the University of Arca,
Yeah.
or Arca University, what I forget what we gotta call it. But you you can't just build an app in our space because you can't just link up to a custodian. You don't just get SOC 2. You have to have securities in place so that your clients don't find out that you screwed up trying to take a shortcut. So that's why companies like Arca, we have that expertise where we can even look at, when you think about who you're engaging from an AI perspective to build your agents, and you
Mm-hmm.
think about the fact that, like I always say, I've onboarded at least, I know it's around 5,000 firms, but in that time, I've heard from advisors and I understand the critical differences about how we onboard business in a commission based environment, a fee based environment, a hybrid based environment, and the fact that you have a lot of information coming into that, that based on those two just simple differentiators that everybody in our space kind of understands if you've been here. But believe it or
Yeah.
not, a lot of the people doing the new deployments don't. We do. And so when I'm looking at an agent requirement or reading requirements that we're getting from firms, we have to surface that concern for our clients. And so that's what's the benefit of working with us and having agents that go through our rigor, because they're smarter than the other agents that are out there. Prove me wrong.
I just had to drop that one in there. It's
That
a good
was
one.
perfect. I liked the bigger applause that you got earlier,
Yeah.
but no, that's good. That's one of my kids in the background. Like, thanks,
Yeah.
buddy.
It's just cheering on his dad. So, no,
Yeah,
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of it. And it's just going to take time. That's the one thing. I think there's it's like slow at first and then all at once right away, right? So you're going to see a lot of that picking up speed. The generic stuff's going to be quick. The enterprise stuff's going to be a little slower than that, but still quick. Then you're going to see a lot of stuff come on. And I think we, on wealthmanagement.com, we had the article that we had written that for, everyone that's preparing in 2025 is going to see like the ROI in 2026. They're going to be really set to use it. And I think that's still true. Think about like, what are we, 3 weeks into, and we've taken agents from being 80 75 80% like accurate on stuff to 100 to 95 plus. So like, where the client actually needs them, and that big gap is literally where the client's putting in that knowledge base that they would with a junior associate or like a human. So it's
right.
that last mile stuff that needs to kind of come on board. So I'm excited. I think there's a lot that's still to be done. There's a lot that we're going to be doing. I'm curious to see how the rest of the market responds, because there's so much conversation around everyone with their AI, which we called early on as well. Everyone's going to have a chat tool. Everyone's going to have, like, I'm surprised at this point. Altruist has Hazel. I'm surprised at this point, like, Adapar hasn't released theirs. Orion did one. I think we saw it when we were at Advise AI, or they talked about it. So, everyone's going to have their chat tool. They're going to be in their silo. Then it's going to be, by the time they build that, the logic already, or the expectation around AI has switched to agentic, which is execution, which we talked about in the other
Right.
podcast episode. So
Agentic
now it's
is
like,
execution. Yeah.
yeah, and now it's going to be like, okay, I'll do stuff in my system. Then it's going to be like, well, really, execution is about how do you span across an entire tech stack, and then that's going to be the open source conversation. How well do you work with others? How well do you play in the sandbox?
And
And
how much of that interaction between the user and the system is just natural language? Very
I think
important to everybody.
a lot of it, and that's the thing, a
Most
lot
of
of it is going to be that, like most of it,
right.
or it's going to trend towards that if it's not
Right.
already. That's what I mean. So yeah, I think there's this, and I'll even go a step further, which we did on the demo when we were talking to some of our clients. There's a step further beyond that too. It's not always going to be one-sided. It's going to be two-sided conversation. There's going to be the proactiveness that's coming from, you know, client, a system telling the client or advisor what to do. So there's going to be all this other things that is going to open itself up to functionality, scalability, and the logistics. And that's going to be really interesting to see. And I know we'll be at the forefront, but I hope a lot of people follow suit, because that open source simplicity of working across different tech stacks is going to be a real game changer.
Right. And we want to know about your tech stack, like you said. At this point, I would love to talk to an RIA that would want to automate a process where that was otherwise, from a technical perspective, we call an ETL. But if you're collecting data from portals and places and aggregating it in front of you on your screen and summarizing columns and what I mean formulatically, formula summing them, not summarizing, but the the opportunity is today to reach out to us to talk about how we can make that agentic. So yeah, I'm 100% confident that the work we've done we will see uh manifest exponentially over the course of 2026. It's already
Agree.
accelerating and it's only the third week. I think that's why you and me feel like it's like late March.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we look at we've
Like
been in the
I
lab
look
working.
like I've gotten some sun and the snowstorms coming in.
That's awesome. Well, I think there's a lot to be determined in the next couple of months. That's, for us and a lot of the other tools, and I'm curious to see how the rest of 2026 pans out. But yeah, like I said, we'd love to hear from you. Whatever agentic work that you think is missing currently in the space, whether it's downstream or upstream, and some of the home offices for large broker dealers, institutions, enterprises, or just large RAs. And yeah, we're curious from our listeners to see, like, where you think it's heading next. So like and subscribe, as they say in the podcast space,
Turn on your
wherever
notification.
you listen to this.
Right.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.